Hello folks, it's Jonathan at the Piano Lesson. We're back again. I was going through some of my music books that I used to use when I had a rip-roaring piano studio back in the day. This was one of them. I don't even think this isn't published anymore. Spectrum Anthology of Short Classics. There were two volumes. This is volume 2. This is volume 1. And I think they were republished as a different version, but it was one of the best collections of classical music I ever came across. I just felt like all the pieces were just right to learn music. You know, they weren't excessively long, and they weren't necessarily overly complex, and they had really beautiful tunes. And I really miss teaching these pieces because, you know, it's one thing to learn the mechanics of playing an instrument and where the fingers go and where the notes go, but to learn to make music out of these pieces, that's something else. And I think that it's very helpful to think like a jazz musician, especially when you're learning classical music, because the thing that makes a great piece of music is its potential. To me, music in general, but especially jazz, is all about possibilities. You know, that's the whole fun of it. And I thought I'd play through some of these pieces and show you some of the possibilities that exist in the music, and to make it just, you know, more fun, because it's no fun to play a piece of music the same way all the time, and it's certainly no fun to think that a piece of music should be played the same way all the time. So let's just take a look at something. One of the first things that popped out at me was this Chopin Prelude. You know, everybody who learns the piano, everybody who learns the piano and music, but typically learns the Chopin Preludes. And this Prelude is in E minor. You could tell there's one sharp there, and the big clue is that it starts with an E, low E. Well, it's an E chord. It's E minor in first inversion, right? And it ends with an E. So that's how you can tell it's an E minor and not the relative major, which would be G major. And I'll just tell you some of the traps that people fall into. There's fingering here. You can't see the fingering, but I will tell you what the fingering is. Typically, you'll see a number 1 above and a 5. So you see 1, 5, and then sometimes it'll 1, 5, 5. People will do things like that, or they'll do 1, 5, 4. That's not such a bad idea, okay? But here's a much better idea. Rather than stretching your hand, okay, and creating tension in your hand, right, and having to compromise where how your hand is balanced, because when we play the piano, we use weight. Essentially, we use the weight of our body, all right, and typically the speed that we attack the piano, and part of that incorporates what part of the fingers that we're using. But I prefer to use the middle finger, to use the middle of the hand, and I start with the pedal down because I want all of those overtones to come out. I don't want to start with this very thin sound and then I lift my hand and nothing happens. So I want to start with the pedal down, so I have that nice resonance, and I lift my hand immediately. So I do 3, lift again, 3, 4, and I switch like that, as opposed to 5, 4, where the weight is kind of on the side of the hand. You know, if you look at your hand, let's go look at your hand. Hello. Hello. I'm just going to kind of latch on to this little lip here where the music stand is. Now, if I just latch on here and look at where my hand hangs, okay? Well, it's hanging sideways. This is actually the best way to play the thumb. Good luck playing the piano that way. You're not going to play the piano that way, okay? That's why early keyboard music didn't use the thumb. Now, we use the thumb, we compromise, and we kind of use it, we use this muscle kind of sideways, right? And particularly on like this corner, right where the corner of the nail is. So that's more common than doing that. But here's the second finger, and I have a slight angle here, and then the third finger, now the top of my hand is much more parallel to the surface of the keys, and then the fourth finger, we're kind of, it sort of wants to do something a little different. It sort of wants to hang like that, you know, and I can adjust that with my shoulder. See, I can adjust that with my shoulder. That's why sometimes you hear an expression, you hear people saying, you know, play from the shoulder. That's a component of, you know, how you're directing the weight behind the fingers. Here's your pinky. Well, now my pinky is just hanging like that, kind of like a monkey, you know. So ideally, that's the perfect position to play the pinky. You're not going to do that on the piano, nor are you going to do it, you know, right? Okay, so what you do is you kind of compromise, you know, and you can use the shoulder to sort of rotate and adjust. It's a bit counterintuitive because, you know, one might think that, oh, this is the best way to play the pinky on the side of the hand like this. And I'm not saying one would never do that, but what happens is that you kind of end up in a situation where you're stuck in a corner and you're kind of trapped in that way. I did know a pianist, a jazz pianist, Derek Smith. He used to kind of do little karate chops on the piano. But actually, a better strategy is to kind of do this and to keep a strong bridge. This is the bridge area, all right, like that. That's where you get your strength from, okay? And you really don't want that bridge to collapse typically. But, you know, if I were to play a scale as an example, the top of the scale, I might face my hand that way as opposed to this way. So if I wouldn't start the scale like this. I would actually start the scale kind of in the opposite, almost. But I would start like this, and I might rotate like I'm turning a doorknob, let's say. You know, and again, none of these rules are hard and fast, but it's a good thing to consider because our bodies are really amazing and complicated, but and then my thumb is also ready under the finger if I need to, but kind of balancing more like this. Okay, so that's sort of the strategy I'm thinking of. All right, and also when I'm repeating these notes, I might choose different fingers, 3, 3, 4, and then I might go 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, or switch to 5, 4, 3. I don't have to keep playing the same fingers over and over again because that's going to sound kind of mechanical and a little bit boring. Now, there's chords down here, and typically we hear these chords played in a very sort of flat manner. Now, I'm doing this deliberately. I'm deliberately playing all the notes at the same volume, and I'm playing them disconnected. All right? And they can sound kind of flat. Right, and this piece is much slower too. It's largo, so it's a slow two. This is cut time. You can't see that, but the symbol looks like this. That's well, you can't see that. The symbol there is cut time, which is 2/2. It's a slow two. It's like a funeral march in a way. But there's a hidden melody within that grouping of chords. There's a counterpoint. There's 3 voices. There's the bottom voice, G. F sharp, F natural, E, let's just take that much for a second. Then there's the top voice, E, E flat, D, it goes all the way over to here, C sharp. And they kind of cascade, they're kind of rhythmically situated so that one sort of changes while the other one stays the same. Then there's the middle voice, B, A, G sharp, G natural. Hear that chromaticism there. They're just half steps, right? I mean, that's really all it is. G to E. And B, ultimately, what are we thinking here? Yeah. Not always chromatic. This middle voice, now that I'm looking at it, is not completely chromatic. That's the middle voice. The lower voice, that's chromatic, and then the upper voice, so that's chromatic, way out to there. Now, watch what possibilities exist. If I play the chord, all right, but I do what's called voicing the chord. So when I say voicing the chord, what do I mean? I mean making one of the notes louder than the other. So here's the pinky louder, and the upper voice is softer, or the middle voice louder, and the outer voice is softer, or the thumb louder, and the lower voice is softer, right? That's called voicing a chord. The term voicing is used to describe how the notes are arranged on the keyboard. So this is a root position, E minor chord. This is first inversion. You could call that a voicing, I suppose. If I take the B out and put it up here, that's a voicing too. I'm opening up the chord. But in this instance, I'm talking about dynamics. So I'm going through this, and I want to bring out the various voices, because whenever we're playing a piece of music, we really want there to be a minimum, bare minimum of 2, but probably 3 different dynamics that we're hearing, because we're really managing an orchestra. So let's just say the melody, which is on top, we want that to be forte, and one of these voices we want to be louder than another. Let's just say mezzo forte, and then let's just say piano. Okay, those are the 3 dynamics. We're referring that's called a dynamic balance. Okay, the dynamic balance between those voices. So 3, 3, 4. That's the. I'm playing a little bit faster than I might want to. And these, because we're in 2, we're counting 1 E and 2 E, and those are 8th notes. And in a meter of 2, in the slow 2 in cut time, we have 2 accents. We have an accent on count 1 and count 2, and those are equal accent, 1 E and 2 E, and almost like imagine kind of like a military snare drum. Now, even though count 1 and count 2 are accented equally, they'll sound different simply because of where they are in the measure harmonically. But we want to determine which voice do we want to hear in the left hand. And when I play this, I'm pedaling. Each time I play a new note, why am I pedaling? Because I don't want to have that blur. I don't want to hear that blur. I want to pedal, 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 pedal. You can do that with a metronome. Pedal each time. Pedal, 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 pedal. Now I don't have to pedal twice there because it's the same note, unless I wanted to disconnect it for some reason, and then the new phrase. There's the low voice. There's still a low voice. Sorry about my E doesn't repeat. I got to call my piano tuner and get that E fixed. Middle voice. Sounds like a completely different piece of music. And how do you know which voice to bring out? Well, you have to use your ear, but you also have to take them all in context. Here's the upper voice. And how do I do that? Well, I put more weight. Remember we were talking about weight earlier. I'm focusing more weight behind one finger, and then I'm lifting the weight off of the other fingers with my shoulder. And also how I strike the key. In this instance, I often like the idea of making your fingers firm and kind of almost like you're landing a plane. You're sliding on the key. If you slide on the key like that, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to control the descent of the key more exquisitely, more incrementally than if you were just to try to force it down in a straight perpendicular motion. Trying to control a key straight down is rough. Okay, do not recommend that. But if I'm sliding the key down slowly, I can control the dynamic of the key. I could pull, I could push, and if I want to bring out one note greater, well, I can just make that key descend a little quicker and put a little more weight behind it. It takes a while before you can kind of control all those, so you time them correctly so they go down. Now, let's just put them all together, all right? Which voice would I want to bring out? I'm not precise. Well, I have to hear all four of them. I don't think I'd want the B, because that just reinforces the melody, maybe. Would I want the E, the G rather, and the pinky? I don't know. Would I want the E? Or would I want them all the same? I think what I would want is I would want to pay attention to when those inner voices change. So the top voice stays the same all throughout over the bar line. It's all E. But the inner voices change right over the bar line. G, F sharp, and then B. So that creates some drama and musical interest. Remember, we're talking about making music at the beginning. You know, how do you make these pieces sound musical? Well, a piece like this has a lot of repetition in it. So you want to be able to bring out some contrast in the piece. And now I could do that too. Loud, loud. I could bring out the notes of that chord if I chose to, rather than making it all very kind of like what someone might call a pastel sound. That's all this kind of the same in the left hand. That doesn't sound necessarily bad, but if that's all I do, it might get kind of just uninteresting. If I did this. You hear that? I'm kind of bringing that out initially. I'm going going to keep that like that. I did that. G, F sharp. Now, would I want to go 5, 5 like that? Well, this is where the fingering comes in. I don't think that's something I would really want to do. I think I'd want to go 4, 5, so I could connect those. That would make more sense. So I'm thinking ahead. Or I could switch to 4 later on. 4, 5, 1. Hear that? How that changed over here? E to E flat. That's a little bit more prominent, so I don't have to overdo that necessarily. Changed again. F sharp to F natural. So I have this cascade of events going on. Dee da dee da 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 dee da dee da. Or playing the wrong note, sorry, E flat, pardon me. But there's this cascade of events going on. There are these changes. Dee da dee da da dee dee da da da. I'm just bringing out the changes when they happen. Dee 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 all of that can be, really needs to be taken advantage of. Otherwise, we're kind of losing that effect. Now, I could choose to play them all in a very pastel way, but I'm not so sure I want to do that. See what's happening here? When I did that with the thumb, I'm playing this chord. I'm switching from this chord, which is basically E minor 7, to A, to 5, A7 with a flat 9. It's kind of what's going on. There's no A in there, by the way, but here's E7, E minor. That's really, if you're looking at the spelling, depending on the spelling, but that's certainly like a diminished sound, whether or not you're going with the correct spelling or not. It's always hard to determine, well, what chord is that? That's an E, a G, a C sharp, and a B flat. E, G, C sharp, B flat. And that's how I determine that chord is in fact C sharp diminished. Okay, you get the note names, the letter names of the notes. Kind of you skip letters in the alphabet. So again, it was voiced. This chord was voiced. E, G, C sharp, B flat. And if I rearrange the order, right? I mean, no matter whether it's C sharp or B flat, it really doesn't matter. It's basically some kind of a C chord. We're skipping letters in the alphabet. C, E, G, B, right? Happens to be B flat, happens to be C sharp, and then it's in first inversion. That's kind of how you figure that out. All right. But it's close enough to a 2-5. That's 2-5, right? I mean, whatever. G sharp, G, D, C sharp. Now, here's a long note. It's an A, a really long note. Excuse me. And since we have that long note, it's nice to hear something, to create some musical interest in here, so the bottom doesn't fall out of the music altogether. What were we doing? From there, from the B flat. Da, da, dee, da, dee, da. This is the chord here. I like going from 5 to 4 myself. I like going over 5, 4, so I can get that connection. I'm switching from 5, 4, 1 to 5, 3, 1, and then I'm going to play 4 here. Is that the only way to do it? No, but I just kind of like that feeling in my hand, you know, that where I get that connection. And nothing happens here. Goes from dominant to minor. Another opportunity. Is that right? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I'm changing fingers again. 5, 3, 1, 4, 2, 1, and then this. So you kind of get the idea. That's one element of learning a piece of music, to that dynamic balance between the voices, and the choice is general choices. You know, so bass, tenor, alto, soprano. Okay, so typically melodies in soprano, but also you make modifications along the way. There's an element of counterpoint in there, even though this piece is homophonic. Even though there's one overarching melody, there's an element of polyphony in there. So in every piece of music where you have homophony, you try to bring out the polyphony, and vice versa. Where you have polyphony, it's nice to try to call out some kind of homophony. Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. This is Jonathan, the Piano Lesson. Drop me a line and say hello, and hi to all my friends out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.